Good evening, and it's Lilia from Scotland's Wild Medicine here. And tonight with me all the way from Canada, Toronto, I've got Dr. Deborah Drake. Deborah, fantastic to see you. How are you?
It's great to see you again. Oh, Lil, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I'm so proud of you for how far you've come and where you're heading and the people that you're going to help. I just can't wait to get on board behind you and help you with anything. What we need to do is wake up the world, and you got just the right tools and attitude to do it.
Absolutely. And listen, you've been on the podcast before, and it was hugely successful and everybody wanted more. But, you know, your schedule's busy, so is mine. But it's just now's the time, because we're setting up this really historical project in Scotland, the very first pop-up healing centre of its kind. And we're going to have all the technology that you're probably one of the world leaders in, not probably, are one of the world leaders in. And that's why I was so keen to get you on to talk specifically about the Quest 9 and the Genius Insight app, two of the pieces of phenomenal, tech that we're going to have at the Healing Centre in Skye. So can you just start by telling us how you got into biofeedback and frequencies, etc.?
It was a very interesting, funny story, actually. I was a medical doctor. I did a family medicine residency, then a psychiatric family counseling residency, and an emergency medicine residency. And I was getting a little turned off by the gunshots and the stab wounds and thinking I had to get to people before they were already half dead. So I went into the preventative stream of medicine, and I went to a Jeffrey Bland convention, who's an expert in functional medicine, where they look at the chemistry and the physiology of the root cause. And I was really grooving on this convention. In the middle of it, my best friend and her ADHD, pyromaniac, wild little 8-year-old son came to my hotel room, and the maid was stealing my radio and gave this kid some chocolate, which he's allergic to. Suddenly, this kid ran across the convention floor, down through the hotel. I'm running down there in my red high heel shoes, chasing this kid. I couldn't catch him. And finally, on the convention floor at this convention, some lady grabs him by the neck and says, "Hey, Sonny, you seem pretty wild. Why don't you come on here and sit in my chair and let me check you out and see what's wrong with you, or see what's agitating you?" And
yes.
So I come running up, huffing and puffing, and I say, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "Well, I've got this music mixer. It has a 50-channel mixer to check the child in 3 minutes for hundreds of thousands, or for thousands of items." And I said, "Really? I'm a musician. I understand multi-track channels." She goes, "Yeah, well, the brain can be recorded at many simultaneous frequencies." So she sits this kid down. 3 minutes later, she has this spreadsheet out there that says he's suffering massive mercury poisoning. His mother arrives by then, coming after him, and she says, "Yeah, I had 35 fillings in my mouth, and my doctor was arrested for putting in fake fillings. So I had thyroid cancer while I was pregnant with him, with a massive mercury overload during his gestation." So the lady says to me, "Well, would you give me permission to just invert it?" And I said, "Invert it?" And she goes, like a debit to the credit of equal value makes a zero. Do you mind if I zero out the mercury in the kid? And I said, "Do your best shot. Let's see what happens." So he sat in that chair for maybe 45 minutes or maybe 50 minutes. The next hour or two, the child would calm right down. He stopped being belligerent. Then he sat up at dinner. Then he started using his forks and knives. Then the next morning, he's talking like a politician with a normal tone of voice and a completely different child. I was like, what in the world just happened in such a quick period of time?
Yeah.
And luckily, he was really relatively healthy in all other systems, that by pulling that one thorn out of him, it relieved the poisonous behaviors that were intoxicating him. So I went home and I bought 4 of these devices. At the time, it was called the QXCI, stands for Quantum Zeroid Consciousness Interface. And the major thing about this computer was that it was rare in all the world, because most computers were made on binary zeros and ones, which can help you on left and right, but it doesn't help you front and back and center. So I studied in Budapest under Professor Nelson, who invented the QXCI device, which was originally called the Phase X machine. I think that's the one I tried at that convention. The Phase X was 50-channel mixer. The QXCI came out as a 100-channel mixer, and then the Quest came out as a 120 to 150-channel mixer over time. And during that time, the computer speeds of the Pentium 4 chip started at 1/100th of a second, which is the same speed as human enzymes. So when you had the Pentium 4 chip and the trivector computer, we could look at 10,000 items very rapidly on many channels and simultaneously get imprints about what the whole totality of the picture looks like. So not to get too technical, but basically every single thing in your body and in the universe vibrates. And you can pick up that vibration and convert it into a digital tone. And that digital tone can give you 6 decimal places of accuracy. And now we can look at your blood or your sore blood, your tired blood, your sick blood, your infected blood, your heavy metal blood, and they all give a slightly different pattern that can be picked up digitally. The benefit being, though, that you don't have to have blood tests to do it or wait in a doctor's office or go for an x-ray machine or wait through thousands of dollars of testing. This is relatively inexpensive, if not free, because sound waves are free, and you're paying for the technician's time to help you discern what that mirror image of you looks like. If that mirror image of you looks like you got a pimple on your left cheek, then why treat the pimple on your right cheek? It's not the right cheek that's got the pimple, it's the left cheek. So by having the right, left, and center in a trinary computer where you have zeros, ones, and twos, we formed the new Skye computer, or the QXCI's next generation Skye, and now the next generation after that, the Quest 9 device, which I believe you're familiar with.
Yes,
And what does it do? It takes you on a quest within yourself, like a journey within. And if you kind of think of it like a 12-string guitar, your body has ether, wood, fire, earth, air, and water signs. Each one of those is a string on the guitar, but it also has a yin and a yang pair, yin for input and yang for output. So really you have a 12-string guitar in the body called the liver and the gallbladder, the yin and yang. The heart and the intestine, the hollow organ is the intestine. The kidney and the bladder, the stomach and the spleen. And then if you look at the airways and the colon, by the time you look at those 12 organs, you can see that mostly 90% of people are pretty good. But the 3% or the 5% of them that's got the thorn in their side, it's causing them to decompensate or exhaust themselves or deplete their minerals, which then run their enzymes to clean the rest of the body. So over time, people get worn down with poisons or biofilm slimy bugs in them. We see about 45% of people have food poisoning. They have salmonella from 10 years ago, or Campylobacter or H. pylori triggering thyroiditis, adrenalitis, ovariitis. So when you have infections, they tend to really get a bit inflammatory to the whole system. So if you can pull out that thorn where they're stuck and you can identify it like a GPS coordinate, you're not driving to the 7-Eleven store down at 45th and 9th. You're going down to the exact location at 36th Avenue and 19th Avenue. So the coordinates of exactly to the liver and exactly to the liver fluke and exactly to the liver fluke remedies all pops up on the screen in red. So now us doctors get out of our ignorance and our biases and our limited education, and we actually see the true person for who's sitting in front of us. And when you can see what somebody's suffering with, you can relieve the suffering. But if you're just constantly fixing the symptoms with another drug that may cause even tougher clearance in the liver or more difficult side effects, it complicates the picture and you can't really see what's going on.
Well, exactly. And this, can you just tell for people that are listening, because you're kind of multi-trained over a variety of different modalities. And I think that's every time I talk to you, I'm like, oh my God, I want to know everything that she knows. Because you're like an encyclopedia, because from your, MD to your musician, to Ayurveda, to Chinese, or to the elements, all of that, you're seeing all of it rather than just the kind of physical body. So,
and how I got so excited about all that is because after I learned medicine, I thought I was at the top of the pile. I'm an emergency doctor. I can go into any department in the hospital and resuscitate somebody, thinking I'm very powerful. But you'd have people come in with rape trauma or learning disorders or cancers that got too far along, and it was very difficult to bring them back. But what made me very smart, I'm going to say it right now, is although I have a great curious mind and was blessed with good intelligence, it was the watching of the Skye computer showing me more and more of what I was missing that made me a better doctor all along. It made me a better vigilant detective, shall we say. And it also made me very vigilant that sometimes, like Inspector Clouseau, it was only that one clue that unraveled the whole case, but there were so many things to look at. Sometimes you got lost in the forest for the trees. Like I had one little boy in my practice, he taught me a lot. He comes into my waiting room and he says, Dr. Drake, every time I sit in your waiting room, I feel suicidal. And I thought that was a really strange thing. And I said, well, where are you sitting in my room? And he showed me that he was sitting right under the vent to my next door neighbor's suite. And the next door neighbor's suite was illegally and unknown to me using high octane orthotic making glues. And all these benzene and glues and other smells of hydrocarbon toxins were in his room. So I went over, knocked on his room, and he was glazed over like he was stoned out of his mind with all the smell of the fumes. So when I came back to my waiting room, I asked the boy to come into the back, and he said he felt a little better sitting in the back. But I was thinking, well, why would this boy be so sick with fumes toxicity unless he already had a toxin in his body and it was tipping him out? So I look on the Skye computer and I look at the boy, and he is pale. He's got blue gums. He looks totally depressed, and his muscles are all in a chance. And what does the Skye say? Lead poisoning from a stained glass window sitting on his kitchen table, where he was eating the lead fumes every time his mother watered the lead stained glass window planter with the plant. She leaked the water into the lead, and the lead leaked onto the kitchen table, and everybody in the entire family turned out to be lead poisoned.
Wow.
And if the boy hadn't said he was suicidal, which is very rare for a child to say suicidal, and lead is the #1 suicidal impression on the brain. So there was a case where the Skye solved an entire family's problem just by accidentally looking at what was the thing that's standing out like a sore thumb. Another case I had in Jersey where a girl said she was melting her skin off with an eczema that was like a toxic, as if she'd been dumped into a pool of acid. And so after much look on her Skye, it says that she's suffering these massive industrial poisons that are dumped from industrial waste products. So I asked her to stay up one night and put a video camera in her bedroom window. And every night at 3 p.m., one of the local huge trucks came by with its gigantic hose, and these guys would look around that no one's watching, crank the sewer off outside her bedroom, and they dump all that industrial sewage into the street outside their house, and all the fumes were coming up in the laundry room grate and infecting this girl who was sleeping right there. Now, how would I ever put that together? I would have never in a million years picked up this toxic waste dump in a child who doesn't have any industrial exposure.
Yes, yeah. And this is the problem now, isn't it? I mean, we've got so many straws on the body's back that because everything, it seems, they've poisoned it or destroyed it, that we're not getting it the way Mother Nature intended. And that's why, as you said, sometimes you can take one thorn out and get a massive result. Other times you have to plod away, and especially when somebody's older and more toxic or has been exposed to a lot more, it's a slower job. And I know that you and I have discussed this before, but because my kind of obsession is that, the what we're seeing in the genius, which is limes, mold, fungus, parasites, worms, and infections. So many people, especially with the whole long COVID story. Are you seeing that?
I know. Hasn't that accelerated our knowledge of what in the world are we looking for here?
I know, absolutely.
Before the COVID hit, I saw Lyme disease in all of its 4 military versions coming up on the scan for months. I'd say even years before it. But in the year preceding COVID, I started seeing hemorrhagic fever of the Congo, hemorrhagic fever of Asia, hemorrhagic fever of chikungunya virus. And all these hemorrhagic fevers were coming up in my patients who had never been to the Congo or Asia. So I thought that maybe the vaccine was tainted with something that would cause a hemorrhagic fever. And therein lied, afterwards, we see hundreds of thousands of people dying of clots in unusual hemorrhagic disorders. Some of the people in my class, they were having people come into their room, and just by shedding, they're having their periods come back in these menopausal women.
I know.
Infertility galore. And unfortunately, you know, that the world has lost its faith that they've been lied to, and it's going to be hard to gain the trust back. So there's where biofeedback, I think, will come into a new era of acceptability. And it's miniaturized now. It's down to $99, not $35,000 if you want a quanta cap. You can actually get 20,000 items tested in 15 seconds. You can get that all for a relatively inexpensive cost of your therapist's time. And you can now have those kind of therapies either put on a water plate to impregnate your food and water, onto earbuds, onto magnetic cuffs, or now I'm using a wristband that's made of light therapy, synchronizing light, magnetism, and sound. So now I'm walking around doing my work all day, but I'm getting my biofeedback while I'm doing my job. I'm not sitting still, connected to a hard wiring. I can actually be mobile and be fit. So now this brings on an audience to us that's not just sick. It brings on the athletes, the people who want to learn new languages, the people who are pilots who want to be able to learn and get over jet lag because they're flying a lot. And to get over the people who are in healthcare, because the doctors and nurses are quite sick when I see them. They've been in the trenches for so long, they're exhausted. They've been shed upon, and they don't even understand how sick they really are. Yeah, and that's the hard part about biofeedback. You have to tell them, are you willing to do something about this?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? And I think most people, their health, it's sort of gradually. I say to people, how's your energy levels? And they go, fine. So how do you feel when you wake up in the morning? Oh, terrible. I said, well, it's not really the way, you should wake up after a good night's sleep awake and alive. But I think we've just got so used to being tired that it's like, to me, the population is exhausted, and that brings obviously your thinking down. It adds to your stress because you go into that state of survival. It's just the perfect storm, isn't it?
It is. And once you have that stress hormone elevated, it causes a lot of oxidative stress in the body, which we now know is approximately 80 or 90% of diseases are relative to exhausted mitochondrial suffocation. No oxidative stress from metal, toxins, infections, or fear. I mean, fear alone, adrenaline rush lasts 7 hours as a half-life of oxidative stress. So if you have road rage and you're fed up about your government and you're protesting in the street, all these things are creating a whole kind of collective consciousness that's forcing the age of Aquarial changes, where we are saying, no, we can't afford to be asleep. We got to be vigilant. But hypervigilance is a disease as well as hypovigilance.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
so what kind of things are you seeing over in Scotland? Are you?
Well,
go ahead.
We're seeing a lot of candida, a lot of fungus. We have we've got some of the best mushrooms in the world here. People come to the west coast of Scotland where we live because it's very damp. We've got lots of forests and trees, and it just seems to me that a lot of as humans are suffering that damp. The fungus can get out of control, and of course add alcohol and a whole load of drugs, birth control pill, antibiotics, etc. into that could just cause a bit of a perfect storm. And then of course stress, and also a lot of the treatments, that people get make that worse, because in general, I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but the allopathic doctor's not looking for that. So you put some heavy treatments on that, you can just basically set the body on fire, and it just starts to burn the house down, shall we say.
I have had a lot of experience in treating candida after I was overdosed with antibiotics when I was younger, and had a lot of metal fillings in my mouth. And then I went and worked at Sick Kids Hospital, where I got a measles shot to start on my rotation. And I was so full of yeast at the time that I had a negative antibody reaction. I was allergic that they decided to give me another measles shot a week later, followed by 18 fillings removed from my mouth and 18 shiny new ones with my new dental plan. So by the end of that week, I was practically autistic. My whole brain just unwound. All my knowledge and education just zapped out of me. And I started looking into Candida heavily at that time. And I was very, very worried, quite frankly, that so many people had it, that it was not on the doctor's roster, and that the implications of getting Candida were to cause a snipping of the X chromosome. It also attacked all the cancers. There's 87 different Candida related to cancers in different organs. So there's Candida tomata or Lapiti in the prostate, and Candida, paracillosis in leukemia, and Candida tropicalis in lymphoma. So I started noticing that on the scanner that each different Candida had a different cancer with it, but I was trying to understand the mechanism underneath. And here's where you just tapped into it. Yeast has estrogen, testosterone, and steroid cortisol receptors in it. So when you are stressed, your yeast grows on the stress hormone. The stress hormone makes your adrenals falter. The faltering adrenals, which are made of zinc, which makes your stem cells and protect you, starts faulting. Now you have no stem cells to protect you. So now that bug starts to take a dominance of a bioslime in you, a biofilm, if you will. And your defenses normally are serotonin, making all the little Christmas tree lights down your guts. But what if the yeast likes serotonin too? So now the yeast eats your serotonin and your zinc and your magnesium and your chromium, and now it's stealing all the ingredients that would make you happy and healthy with good blood sugar to the brain. So what do? You start craving sugar. So the parasites eventually, if they reach enough volume, they start with their own compulsion, their own hungry impulses in the middle of the night to make you eat sugar, or drink coffee, or to have alcohol full of sugar, or to have cocaine, which is a stimulant, or morphine to calm down the worms, which are morphine addicts. Most people don't know that worms have opioid receptors. So if you have a person with an opioid addict, has got to have worms.
Yeah.
Because they would be dead if they didn't. Because worms have the physiology to modulate morphine out of you, then they are taking down half the dose you just shot up with, and now people on the street might actually accidentally get into a larger dose of it than they expected. And suddenly they've been used to taking a lot because the worms were eating half of it. But when they then jack up that dose to feed those extra hungry, bigger colony of worms, what's going to happen? They might have an overdose. They overshot their capacity. Now, I've been deworming addicts, sex addicts, drug addicts, and you cannot believe how much better their impulse control is when you put that zinc back into them. But how are you going to tell if they're low in zinc if you don't have a scanner to say your minerals are terrible and you have no thyroid to absorb it and your adrenals are shot? And the reason this happens, folks, is because it's called an adaptation phase. When you're very stressed, you show it. When you're exhausted, you can't show it. But somewhere in the middle, you adapt to it and you don't show the stress, but there's still disease progression going underneath.
Yes. Yeah.
So if we can tap into that with the Skye, that's where we can see that they're approaching the cliff, but we want them to take a detour and portage around it rather than going over the cliff and having to pick them up from pieces at the bottom.
Yes. Do you use the HRV in your practice?
Yes, I do. I have the vital scan from quantumclarity.net. And I find that invaluable because it gives me a second point of information. You know, as scientists, we like to measure things with two different instruments to see if they corroborate. So I use the biofeedback to define the cardiogram, the EEG, the electromyographies, and the skin reactions. But when you look at the Genius or even the Skye and it says you're low in neurotransmitters, and you have no dopamine left from worms, and you have no serotonin left from yeast, and you have no minerals left from your tapeworm in your pancreas or whatever, when you go on the vital scan, it actually corroborates that your cardiogram is lower in voltage, that your brain voltage is low, your EEG voltages are low, that your mineral resistance makes you hyperconductive, that your body has high insulin resistance or stress hormone resistance. So when you see that the corroboration of this fabulous subtle energies is picked up by what we would call a standard medical test of a cardiogram. And remember, the cardiogram is a voltammogram, a voltage meter of how your heart's changing over time. But the heart math solution people took that cardiogram and they dissected the heck out of it. And they found out that it can be very, very predictive of a heart attack or what I call hardened arteries. When say a pulse is flowing down your artery, the artery sort of extends as it passes the wave and then it contracts a bit. But if you're very, very stressed with cortisol, your arteries they get so stiff that when the pulse goes through, they don't expand, they just are stiff. So just like in whitewater rafting, if you went down a narrow canal, the water speeds up and gets racier in the narrows. So your blood gets speedier in the narrow, hardened arteries. And so the vital scans can show you that you have and by the way, this is the most accurate risk factor for heart disease above every other risk factor. Smoking, heart disease, family history, high cholesterol, diabetes, they are not as predictive of a heart attack coming as stiffened arteries, which can be picked up by early warning signs of a vital scan or a cardiogram analysis dissected into how tight are your arteries. And if the arteries are tight, you know that the adrenals are tight. But here's where the doctors make a big mess. What drives the adrenals is the stomach renin, angiotensin hormone. So most people who have adrenal problems and high blood pressure, I look one step up to the stomach and spleen and pancreas and say, they've got to have a renin angiotensin inflammation up here, because that's what's driving the alarm bells down in the adrenals. So in everybody who's sick, I go back to their stomach and I say, you must have some bug in here that's triggering the alarm bells. And then when the stomach is calmed down and the renin and angiotensin calm down, you see the cardiogram looks back to normal. They're not having a heart attack. They were just so clamped down from the parasites and the high histamine and the lack of dopamine or the lack of serotonin. So I believe that we're in a time where I think the evils and errors of the last 50 to 70 years of antibiotic indiscriminate abuse is leading to more bugs, more resistant bugs, and a higher number of bugs. Then at the same time, we're having this explosion of drug use of all kinds of street drugs that is fostering the adrenal stress. And then we have birth control pill and travel sex that makes everybody move their bugs from the tropics back to Scotland or from Cuba over to Canada. And when you get the pinworm on the beach where the dogs and horses are pooping, when you come back to Canada, the doctors here aren't thinking roundworm on the beach. And so that person gets a little roundworm and a little sweaty. Then they get a little tight in the neck. Then they start grinding their teeth. And then they start being diabetic. And then they start having sexual rage. And that's when the doctor says, now you just need a psychiatric drug, missing the pinworm psychosis that drove all those behaviors.
Yes, I know. And
I had one sex addict and sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, carry on.
I just had one sex addict and he said, doctor, I can't pass a single massage parlor anywhere in Toronto without stopping in. I have the wildest compulsions. I don't even know how it could be this strong, and I don't even know what it is. And I want to stop, but I don't know what's wrong with me. So I do a scan on him, and he's got a rip-roaring case of pinworm prostatitis. And it's making his prostate tickle, giving him constant erections. So he thinks that he's God's gift to women, that he's so well endowed that he better just do something about it. So he keeps getting these hand jobs. Well, what happens after I deworm him? I don't see him for 3 months. I just filled with zinc again, which is impulse control. And he never came back for 3 months. And then he comes back and he says, Dr. Drake, I haven't been to a parlor since you dewormed me. It stopped all those bizarre things. And Dr. Drake, I'm so glad that you forgive me, because I thought it was all my fault. And I realized now it was the worm causing these compulsions. So I really want you to know that you helped me, and for me, it was a great story, because we don't necessarily know how we help people. We just turn that 1 degree on the rudder of their ship and they end up in a different continent if they sail far enough. So we don't have to change a lot of things in people to get a difference in them. But the subtlety of a small change is called the butterfly effect in quantum medicine. When a small butterfly flaps its wings, they say you can feel it all across the ocean. Or when I pray for somebody, suddenly they phone me exactly when I'm praying for them. They're getting the quantum entangled particles which means 2 electrons are always paired. And when one is separated by a photograph or distance, they always move with each other in concentric motion. So it's important to realize that quantum medicine gives us the chance to look at the microscopic mini look. And then sometimes, of course, us practitioners can get caught in the forest for the trees. So we've designed some softwares now that simplify these systems into a artificially intelligence analysis that says, of all the 25 things wrong with you, these top 2 things are the ones that if you fix these 2 things, you get an 85% improvement in the person.
Yeah.
So we try to teach that. Let's peel the layers of the onion, take the outer layer with which they're giving up the outer layer. You can't take layer number 5 down until you go through layer 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
And that's where the biofeedback allows you to peel the outer layer. The next week they come back, you see the second layer, the third layer. And over time, that improves them. And the benefit nowadays is that you can also now get them to take it home with them. So now I don't have to do all the chemotherapy on one Sunday a month. And then I wait for all to fester back. I set them on a Quantum Genius program, which is a mini portable, exportable software that you can send 150 song playlist to the cell phone of your client. So they're at home taking it half an hour for breakfast for nutrition, another playlist for cancer at lunch for another half hour, and another detox of heavy metals in the evening. Now that person's getting 3 sessions of world-class therapy, 3 days a week. So they're having 9 sessions of improvement before you saw them the next time. And when you see them the next time, then they've already taken off layer 1, 2, and 3, and we're getting right down to 4 and 5 right away.
Yes.
So that's where we're speeding people through their healing by getting a better picture, faster, less invasively, less expensively, with no waiting time. But now, having seen where they're struggling, like a GPS coordinate, there's a fire over in Sector 4. Now we can go and direct what are not only the problems in Sector 4, but what I've been building for the last 2 years is the gematria verbal remedy of all of medicine. So for the Genius program, which is a mini laptop, instead of using a laptop on the the Quest 9 or Skye computers, we've made it into a cell phone app or tablet app. Now, this gives a great affordability for accessing remote locations.
Yeah.
Okay. It also gives us a chance to have a measuring tool for evidence-based medicine, because you're going to get the scores on people. And if the scores are dropping from red to yellow to green, you know that you're moving forward. And if they're getting worse and worse, you can see that you're doing something to jeopardize them. See, that's where I think medicine isn't looking at where they're jeopardizing people. They're not measuring the side effects well enough to say, hey, we have 100,000 deaths from this vaccine. Maybe we should stop it before it becomes 2 million deaths.
I know.
Now, of course, we do know that there is other political forces at play here. So I would like to mention that if you really do want to get well, you shouldn't put your health in the hands of someone else, because every person you do is going to have a limited knowledge, a limited skill, a limited bias, and they are not going to think of you. They may want to sort of tell you what they think is going on with you, but if you really see the depth of the breadth of the knowledge that we can get from these biofeedback scans, it's highly personal, highly spiritual, highly nutritional. So if you want the day-to-day changes in somebody and you're giving them, a 5-minute visit at the doctor's office and a hand of a prescription, you're not really changing their mentality. You're not changing their sense of responsibility for themselves. And you're not even giving them the sense of self-care that they could do on themselves. In fact, maybe doctors are hoarding their clients, keeping them as diabetic so they can have $100 prescription a month to the pharmaceutical industry. But if they all just got D-tapewormed, what would be the rate of diabetes after that? We don't have money to pay for that research. The pork farmers aren't going to pay for that research unless they, like in America, they just stopped exporting pork to 6 or 7 countries because its quality did not meet the standards of Europe and Asia.
Wow.
Okay, so now what's wrong with the pork then? don't just stop the pork farmers from their jobs, clean up the pork farm by broadcasting quantum medicine to the whole barn and deworm that species so that they're not having those difficulties.
Yeah.
Now, I could say, satirically, maybe they want those pork very fat because they bring more money at slaughter. So maybe they don't mind that they're having a lot of corn-induced candida in that corn-fed animal. Maybe we aren't realizing how many hormones are being injected that are now changing our hormone structures in humans, where we're having a generation of people who think that they're the wrong sex. Maybe they've been fed too much estrogen, plastics, phthalates, and all kinds of things that are altering the genetic ratio of their sex hormones. How would you ever going to find that out, though, unless you measured it?
Well, exactly. And there's so many
people.
So
I'm really happy that you're starting the clinic.
Yeah, so many people are struggling to get pregnant now as well. Whereas certainly when I was younger, your biggest worry was getting pregnant, not trying not to get pregnant. And there's so many people having to go the IVF. It's a real issue, and we're going to be facing a massive depopulation situation. But listen, hi Kate, that's somebody saying hi there. And if you've anybody watching this on replay or live, please, if you've got any questions for Dr. Debs, just ping it into the box. So let's talk about worms, because obviously I'm actually going to be doing a whole retreat on autoimmune issues. And with everybody's talking about parasites now. I don't know if you've seen the movie. I think I might have sent it to you. But I didn't realize you don't really use WhatsApp. It's better to get you in your email. But I sent you. It's really interesting. And it's, so
okay,
how do you treat is it because all these Latin names that I'm like that. I'm still like, oh my God, what are all these things called? Yeah. Do you have different protocols for different worms and parasites, or how do you treat it? Are you treat it with the Quest 9, the sound frequencies?
I find that parasites are particularly stubborn. I started treating it when one of my nieces jumped off a highway bridge at the full moon full of pinworm psychosis. And I started really looking into it back then. The doctors refused to treat her for worms. They kept putting her on psychiatric drugs. So I snuck into the hospital and I gave her the quantum, and suddenly she was sane by Monday. The pinworm psychosis was driving a high alcohol and fermentation content. Think about it like this. Have you ever seen people drink beer, they get a bit drunk? That's ethanol. But people who drink tequila get a bit crazy. That's phenol alcohol. So yeast produces ethanol and makes you sleepy like beer, but worms produce phenol alcohol that makes you aroused and psychotic like tequila. So when I'm taking people through a deworming, you first need to know that there's a part of the brain, I think it's called the accumbens or something. It has a total revulsion area in the brain that says if you tell people they got worms, they go, oh, that's disgusting. I don't want to look at it. Oh, my God. Oh. And they block it out. And I think that the worms live in you to make sure that you're not aware of them so that they can steal from you kind of under the covers. Now, how I tell if people have worms is I look at their eyes. Whenever you have worms, it steals the vitamin B from the body. So one of the eyes, the lateral eye muscle here is dependent on B vitamins. So if they have alcoholism or flucaholism, one of the eye muscles will get lax and they'll start drifting out. So one eye is looking straight, but the other eye is aiming out. And what I've been taught by the Ayurvedic doctors is that other non-dominant eye is looking for food on the table. Your dominant eye is looking out for you, but the non-dominant brain is being harvested for its impulses by the parasites looking for their food. Now, unfortunately, what happens is people start not realizing they're infected, and they start eating the foods that the worms love. So they start going for the pizza and the beer and the gluten and the cheese and the very easy to digest high sugar contents. So now they have a sugar sweet tooth inside them. Then that parasite causes tequila to burn their pancreas. The pancreas is also with yeast burned by hexane gas, or what we call acetyl or aldehydes. So now the pancreas is burnt, little holes all through it from all the alcohol. And the alcohol is a fat soluble liquid. So wherever the islet cells of Langerhans, which make insulin in your pancreas, are these little fat islands among the bicarbonate soda pop can squirter, the alcohol is killing the islet cells preferentially. So after you've had worms for any particular time, you're going to have alcoholic pancreatitis, alcoholic fatty liver disease, alcoholic cirrhosis, gallbladder issues, elevated cholesterol, elevated blood sugar, and usually the yeast in particular steals all the chromium and magnesium from the pancreas. So now I have no chance to get over my blood sugar cravings. So now the worm has trapped you in a diabetic high sugar, and now you got no minerals to defend yourself. So now the worm wins. So what I got to say to you is, why did the worm grow in the first place? Well, first of all, it could be that you had unwashed food. So you might want to put some vinegar on your lettuce to get the amoebas and the worms off the food when you're bringing it home. You can now use our electronic plate from the Skye and or the Genius and put your groceries on the plate and broadcast anti-food poisoning frequencies and high energy and high vibration into your food before you even eat it.
Right.
But to take it a next step further, most people try to change the plant. I say change the soil. If the soil was less sweet, it was now very salty with bone marrow broth and good vegetables and salt and shaker, using Himalayan salts and whatnot. The body won't grow the sweet bugs because every bug grows at a particular pH. So humans grow at 7.4. The human gut should be sour here at 6.5. That's where we go acidophilus at 6.5, right? Acid producing bugs love an acid gut. So your blood is neutral and your gut is acid. That makes a donut with a hollow core. And what's coming out the hollow is the negative poisons, okay? The pH is 6.5 or 5 in the gut. The poisons have to go to the exit. But what happens in worms and yeast? The polarity reverses. The yeast is pH 7.6, and the tapeworm is 7.6, and yeast is 7.8, and mycoplasma is 8.0 pH. So if your gut is filled with all this high fermentation and high pH, guess what happens? Your blood is here, but now the guts are sweeter than the blood, so the sweetness starts drifting into the bloodstream, out of the gut into the blood, instead of out of the blood into the gut. So now the fermentation is coming out of your gut into you, not out of you. And that's where the liver, which has a special enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase, and it sucks all the alcohol out of you. If you can drink 6 beers in a day, you got enough of that. One beer an hour, you have enough alcohol dehydrogenase to clear it. But what if you drank 24 beers? Well, if humans can only absorb 6, who's drinking the other 18 beer? It's the tequila worm that has the alcohol dehydrogenase enzyme in it by goo gobs, and that tequila worm can handle buckets of alcohol and still live in that bottle, right? So after a while, the more you ferment, the more the worms start over fermenting, and you start getting into this vicious circle. And the worst part about it is that once you have any infection, it sucks the sulfur out of your liver, sulfur for skin, hair, nails, glucose management through insulin. Insulin is made of sulfur. Your ligaments and tendons are made of sulfur. Your intervertebral discs are made of sulfur. The collagen in your face and your wrinkles is made of sulfur. So if you have these worms sucking the liver dry from alcohol poisoning that you don't even know you're fermenting, the sulfur goes down, and now you got the wrinkly old faces and the torn tendons and the big belly, and suddenly this person is a non-alcoholic liver disease, and they're not even a drinker. I had a little old lady who was accused. She had pancreatitis and a gallstone, and the doctors in the hospital were really enraging me because I knew that she drank tea. She was 85, and I've never seen her drink in any of the 30 years I knew her, and they accused her of being an alcoholic. So I started thinking, is she an alcoholic? I started wondering myself. So I went to her house, and the only thing I could find was some rubbing alcohol. She had a rash on her neck, and she'd pat the rubbing alcohol here on the neck. Now, I don't know if that was the only thing that she was doing, honestly, but when she actually died, she had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and it turned out that she had a rip-roaring case of yeast and flukes. It was the flukes that she had. Her husband had it, her daughters had it, and they all got lymphoma cancer, and several of them died of it. So this is the case that made me start going raging about looking into flukes.
Yes.
Now there's four kinds of worms. Well, there's three. Think about my favorite. The one segmented worm on the tip here, just the last little tip here, that's called a cestode, tapeworm. 2 segments is called a roundworm, and 3 segments is called a fluke worm. The fluke worms I found in every breast cancer, liver cancer, pancreatic cancer, uterine cancer, intestinal cancer, and prostate cancer. So I started looking into this, and I'd like to write a book called What the Fluke. And it says, you know, if we are missing that one fluke flying around the blood from eating too much sushi or eating raw fish guts or having sex with somebody who was from the tropics who had that in them, then we're really hush-hush on realizing that cancer is contagious. The fluke is the contagious, or the yeast is the contagious component that's wrecking the soil in you, that's driving the oxidative stress and driving the zinc out of your stem cells. And worms, by the way, love zinc. So I believe that there's a lot more problems with people's impulse control dependent on zinc. Adrenals are made of zinc. The prostate and the G-spot in women is made of zinc. You know the old crazy rhyme, zinc to think, zinc keeps you pink, zinc if you need a shrink, zinc if you want the urge to drink, zinc if you have a belly to shrink, zinc if there's no power in the winky dink. And that means that erectile dysfunction is one of the first signs of worms. The men don't have enough zinc to have an erection, and the prostate is made of zinc. Now, some men get sexual addictions like that man. Every time he would have the parasites stimulating his urges, he would ejaculate, and every ejaculate has 1 zinc for every 1 sperm. So a man who ejaculates 10,000 sperm a night loses 10,000 zinc. But a sex addict who's masturbating 5 or 6 times a day, he loses all the zinc enough to, as they say, go blind because there's no more zinc for the vision. So the vision of people who are very full of zinc deficiency is gray hair, because the hair is made of zinc and selenium. White eyebrows or a white beard in a man, he's starting to get the low zinc and he can't make the testosterone anymore. So he's a sitting duck for some prostate cancers or problems. But then zinc also runs the adrenals, vitamin B, C, and zinc. So if a worm person's looking out their eye, one side, no B vitamins, and they're gray in their hair, they're low in zinc, now we've got a hypoadrenal state. So now when we start treating them with the biofeedback, we have to worry that if we jump on the worms the very first day, they may not even have enough adrenal to handle it. Or as I like to tell my clients, I have to heat up your frying pan to fry the bugs. So I got to put you on the biofeedback for 3 or 4 weeks to build up your minerals, your hydration, your hormones, your stem cells, your zinc in your prostate. And once you've got some adrenal control, now I can come in and say, now let's go spank those little worms and devise a sleeping plan to put them to sleep and knock them out of you. Now, here's one thing that I would like to mention to you, and this is very important. Now, I've been doing this for 50 years, right? So I sort of have my tricks. But I have noticed a very interesting trick. If you try to detox somebody, you have to get them off of gluten, because gluten is the shape of morphine, called glutomorphine, and milk is the shape of casomorphine. And since worms are morphine addicts, then if you're trying to get somebody off an addiction and you don't take them off of milk and wheat, you're not going to have success, and they're going to have a relapse, usually. So I'm very aggressive to take people off of gluten, and I want you to remember this when you're working in your clinic. Gluten is triggered by food poisoning, gluten antibodies.
Yeah.
So this is why I think that 50% of the population, or possibly more, is
Yeah.
having silent food poisoning or worms, and which is triggering their autoimmune diseases through the gluten antibodies. And then the gluten antibodies attack synapse nerve bulbs. The coating of your synapse is made of gluten. The synaptic protein that releases the neurotransmitters is made of gluten. The myelin sheath along the nerve is made of gluten. And any cellular gland like pituitary, pineal, thyroid, heart, adrenals, ovaries, or testes, those areas are very electric. So they would have more nerves. So they're even more gluten sensitive. So during your detox, you would always start with reducing the autoimmunity by filling in salts, minerals, water. You help the liver start spitting out the old bad alcohols through sulfur. That's, nat sulf as a tissue salt, or MSM if you're arthritic, or DMSO on your joints, or any other way you can get sulfur into you, primarily is the form of glutathione made from cysteine and sulfur.
Yeah.
So I always start every session with a glutathione burst. I just put the washing rag down there, let them soak up all as many poisons as I can. Because if I'm going to start detoxing them, I'm going to be starting a fire in a theater. I better have the emergency exit open, right?
Absolutely.
So you want to make sure you open up the drainage organs when you're starting biofeedback. And the drainage organs have one disadvantage, and that is that they're hollow. So the yin organs in Chinese medicine are solid, but the yang organs are hollow tubes to drain out, like the bladder, the bowel, etc. So if you don't start your detox protocol with some kind of a laxative, probiotics, opening up the drainage of the bladder and liver and the kidney, you're really going to have a tough time when you start now try to detox old stored poisons, because there's too many trains in the station. You have to empty the train station of the old logs, the old manure, so that you have room for a new toxic load to come down the pipe to get out of you if you're going to stimulate them. So start always with water, minerals, and hydration to get them fluid. I always like to mention also that if you don't change the soil, you won't change the bug. But what is the most important thing that's keeping the soil problematic? It's heavy metals usually, or pesticides. So I always do, as a part of my original protocol, the biofilm for pesticides, which are xenoestrogens. They cause blood clots, they cause stickiness, they cause yeast to grow, and they cause a tremendous disorientation to the adrenals. I mean, your ovaries and your adrenals are supposed to be level. If the ovaries are screaming high with yeast, the adrenals are shutting down. And the adrenals, what do? They make the opposite sex hormone. So a woman with a yeast infection, her testosterone is suppressed in the adrenal. A man who has a yeast infection or worms, his adrenals are making more estrogen because he's inflamed, and he's causing this adrenal overdrive. So the man grows breasts. The man gets a little muffin top on his growing soft tissue belly full of estrogen. So when we take this and extrapolate it down to children, maybe we've been feeding children too many sugars, too many antibiotics, too many heavy metals, too much screen time. Whatever they're doing, we're changing their bioterrain, and the film and the bugs that grow in them is changing too. One thing I learned about biofeedback is that the people who had E. coli in their stomach, in their colon, they had a very healthy colon. The E. coli, the non-pathogenic food poisoning kind, the healthy E. coli, guess what? It recycles 60% of your progesterone. So if you have an antibiotic that knocked out your bowel flora for 6 months, you're losing 60% of your progesterone for brain, bones, heart, anti-cancer, breast health, uterine health, muscles, bones, intelligence. There's 100 functions for progesterone where there's only 2 or 3 functions for estrogen. So if you want to stop the world from aging, you need to get the zinc back in the ovaries and the testicles. So that's turkey meat, mozzarella cheese, cashew nuts, and you're going to stop eating the gluten in chicken and bread. So your newfound love is fish and turkey and lamb and veal and not pork and chicken temporarily if you're detoxing, so that you can
Mhm.
calm down the autoimmune disease. And
Mhm.
then you open up the drainage organs. And now on the second or third or fourth visit, you come in there with your machine gun, Sally. Let me go in there with that Rife generator. Let me, fill them with whatever remedies they need. Now, here's where I think that biofeedback is absolutely brilliant, okay? Everything is digital code. So if I have a problem with my liver, there are certain other herbs that have the exact same matching frequency as liver. So say the liver is 763 hertz, but
Mhm.
milk thistle is minus 763 hertz. So when
Uh-huh.
the liver is overinflamed, you need a minus debit to the credits, if you will.
Yes.
And so as we pull down with the milk thistle, we reduce the inflammation of the liver. It slides back into homeostasis. And
Yes.
this is why we don't say we don't cure anybody. Your body can cure itself if
Yes.
unburdened with these extra suppressive frequencies or suppressive toxins or metals or poisons or estrogens. And therein lies the rub. I don't really think that the body's intelligence is respected. I think that our body's intelligence is off the charts supreme. And if we keep stuffing
Absolutely.
foreign agents and foreign poisons and toxins, what are we expecting? Anything different?
Absolutely. We're all poisoned. And when you've got the Quest 9, I actually sometimes think it's amazing we're all still alive. But with
Yeah,
the
I know.
sheer amount of information that the body is holding. And also,
Well, I would
I
like
think,
to. I wanted to reiterate what you're saying. There is the genius has one other advantage over the Skio, and that is that it has a light bracelet. And one of the things that I found with parasites is they live in hollow organs. So the
right.
hollow yang organs are hard to clean because biofeedback usually causes a liquid wave to go through. But if you consider that bioenergetic light therapy using infrared light,
Uh-huh.
red light goes through the arteries in your veins and it piggybacks the frequencies into the hollow organs that they otherwise couldn't reach. So I'm
Yeah.
combining my therapies now with genius biofeedback and a light PEMF magnetic bracelet. And now
Yeah.
I'm getting all the three forms of energy, light, sound, and magnetism. So I'm not allowing that pinworm eggs to hang out in my colon. I might have cleaned them from my solid liver, but I left the eggs of them hanging around in my gallbladder or my bladder. And so I did my biofeedback on somebody for 3 weeks, but 3 months later, they came back and they're right back to where they started,
Yeah.
which is frustrating and expensive and debilitating, quite frankly. So the
And
biofeedback allows you to peel those layers of the onions once and for all. And
uh-huh.
quite frankly, the hardest part for me as a doctor to get straight in my head was that if you started on a bioterrain graph over here where there's yeast and you're trying to get over down here to acidophilus, you have to move from mycoplasma to tapeworms to H. pylori to funguses to molds to get back over to the. You actually have to go through multiple different soil based bugs to come back with the normal one. So I kept thinking, well, this is bad. They're getting worse. No, no. It's the lesser invasive bugs that started showing up, and less of invasive bugs by the end of it meant that they weren't so fermentative. They weren't in the wrong pH. They weren't having all their minerals sucked out of them to go to the yeast, stealing their chromium and their carnitine and their magnesium. So now
Mhm.
I got a chance to recover. And therein lies the teeter-totter nature of this business. You pull things up to the surface, then you scrape them out like a vacuum. It's like spring cleaning. You pull everything out of your closet, and then you have to fold them all and put them back and throw half of it away.
Yeah. Exactly. And I know that this is another thing when it comes to, getting the bioterrain balanced, because we know we can affect the bioterrain fairly quickly, but then it's the
Yeah.
maintenance of it, isn't it? And this kind of 2-year mark of, maintaining great habits for a period of time to give the body a chance to go, right, okay, this is how we do it now. This is a new way to be. And that's obviously the big challenge. But I know from, I've suffered from candida on and off probably my whole life since they started putting mercury in my mouth when I was 5. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I just didn't understand the sort of germination process where you're feeling great and you do what everybody does. You kind of cut back on your protocols and you're like, that's me fixed now. And then before you know, 6 months, 12 months down the line, you're exhausted again because you've never really, you've not maintained the situation. And, you know, the reason I want all this equipment that we have, this state-of-the-art technology, the AMP coils, I want people to be able to access them regularly so that they can really, you know, just slowly, you know, it's just gently catchy monkey, you know, or just
strip
reminding
mining.
them. Yes. Just like, you know, come on, the body, we know, we're just reminding the body what to do. And eventually, of course, you're like that, oh, wow, I'm feeling better. I've got more energy. I've got more clarity. I'm excited again, because I think even when you're really healthy and as you get older, you just have to pay up more attention. You know, it's not a job that ever ends.
Yeah. The only part I'm not so happy with is I feel like we've let our seniors down and let them fall so far over the bridge that it's a lot of work to get them back. But it's not impossible, folks. And the fact that we can now put it on your cell phone, because a lot of seniors have cell phones now, and the $99 Quanta Cap app gives you what the $35,000 computer does, put through their phone where they can handle it at a much more day-to-day, more I would call it a compliant manner, where they're doing it more often than you ever would, and at a lesser cost, so that they feel better and they start getting kind of the momentum of knowing that I'm feeling more clarity.
Yeah, because I think, you know, the emotional health is every bit as important as somebody who's pretty driven and, you know, likes to have a lot of energy. There's nothing worse than not feeling excited, and, you know, and that's why I know this thing in Skye. I don't know if you've ever been to Skye. Have you been to Scotland?
Well, remember I told you about that young little lad? That's where he was conceived, and I know about Skye because of him, but I've never been there.
Oh my God, you need to come and visit. It is jaw-droppingly stunning. And what a place to come and heal, you know, the energy of the mountains, the energy of the rivers, the waterfalls. And then with this technology, we've got an amazing chef.
Oh.
So I'm just excited.
So now you're putting the Bioterrain right in your facility.
Yes. I'm calling it the wild energy spa, inside and out. You can sit out there and take in the energy of the mountains. You can come in and you can just gently, you know, remind the body balance is there. And frequencies. Because I think you know, one of the big challenges always is, if, you know, a lot of my clients are young women, diagnosed terminal, you know, they've got young kids, and then I come in and it's like, you need to do this, you need to, and I'm just like, it's not going to work. I'm going to make you more stressed, more scared. We need to have places where we can bring families in and really retrain. And it's got to be done in communities, hasn't it? We have to.
I think you're making a really important point there. Because really, any one person who's sick in the family, through the law of quantum shedding, quantum vibration, we're all in the same field together. So the emotions of the family, which we now know through quantum biofeedback, can be really dramatic in creating Hamer conflicts and blowing a fuse in the brain for an emotional reason. So no matter how many drugs you put down in that organ downstream, you haven't fixed its electrical fuse panel first.
Yes.
And this is where I've gotten so deeply into quantum medicine, because as I've said on a recent podcast on the last week, I was on the Carrie Cassidy podcast, which is called Project Camelot, and she was saying that we were literally changing people's DNA, making super soldiers, making genetic modification to the human race to make us into a silicated race instead of a carbon-based race, and that some of the experiments that have been apparently occurring around the world to expose us to graphenation or graphene oxide to make us stronger have in a way been I don't know what it would be, a live field experiment without our consent to see how many people could handle graphenation without causing them to stroke or have a problem.
I know.
And, you know, we every single day, I'm sickened to see more and more statistics coming out that have confirmed our worst worries and worst fears about this. But, you know, maybe this is the turning point where people will get so disgusted with being manipulated, lied to, or sold a false bill of goods that they're going to demand to have their own personalized, individualized, customized healthcare protocol that's specifically for them. And if it's done like that, I truly believe that they will get better, because you're addressing the thorn in their side. You know, I often say giving every single senior a cholesterol pill is not the way to go. Cholesterol pills are antifungal antibiotics. They just were put in a different packaging label in the box saying it's cholesterol because fungus among us wasn't very kosher. But the drugs in the statins are antifungal drugs. And so why aren't we telling our seniors that you're full of sugar and mold and fungus and getting them off of those drugs, because the statins are sucking the fat out of the brain, causing dementia. So what are we going to do? Have a no cholesterol but a demented seniors group?
I know.
It's ridiculous. And if you don't understand that yeast causes high cholesterol, then you wouldn't look for that. And by the way, I've studied 500 people with yeast infections, and the only 2 blood tests that came up positive. And I did 500 blood tests on everything you could think of, including autoimmune markers and everything. The only thing that really came up as an early warning marker, and you might want to write this down, is called the monocyte test. That's when you do your white blood cell, neutrophils, lymphocytes, basophils, eosinophils, and monocytes. The monocytes hold vitamin D. Vitamin D sucks up bullets called minerals. And this little SWAT team, the monocyte, is like your first responder, like a cop on the beat. And anybody who triggers that cop, he phones on his radio and goes, company barracks, bring on the SWAT team, the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, bring on all the immune system in overdrive. And that's how we get these cascading huge autoimmune reactions, because we can't shut up the monocyte first responder. When the monocyte is given enough sulfur, he shuts up and he stops. Bugle boy, there's hell in the house. The calmness of the immune system responds to sulfur. So this is why people who live in Europe who tend to eat a lot of garlic, onions, mustard, curry, ginger, turmeric. The Indians and the Asians eat these hot, spicy sulfur foods because they kill parasites through generations of knowledge. The grandmother's old wisdom said, we're going to give you a spoonful of sulfur and molasses to deworm every Jamaican every spring. But why do we stop doing that, right? We stop thinking that we need to do prevention. Our grandmothers got not listened to.
I know. My mum used to give us malt, molasses.
Oh, yeah. And the molasses is pure vitamin B. When mixed with sulfur becomes an antiseptic. And so here we are giving up. And can I mention one other thing, which is kind of, I think that people just don't get the difference between pharmaceuticals and food. The only difference is they spin in different directions. So the liver has 2 halves, 1 half for cleaning and 1 half for building. When the liver has a poison in it, it discerns the poison. A poison spins right, dextro, and a living food spins left.
Yes, left.
So the liver goes, the liver has a left for living, dead, or dextro for dead. So dead foods, the liver says, you got to go. So it spins them out of the turnstiles, spits it out the gallbladder, out into the colon, and out the exit. So what I ask you this, is a food a living thing? Yes. So it spins to the left. Is a nutraceutical food-based vitamin a left-spinning vitamin? Yes. It spins to the left. You can see my new website at inrhythmnutrients.com. All food-based vitamins. Now, what if I gave you an antibiotic? It's actually formed in a laboratory, so it has it's not a left-spinning living, it's an extraction of digitalis from the foxglove plant into digoxin. But that is a right-spinning, chemically prepared right dextro-spinning molecule, okay? Now, here's where it gets really dicey. Please don't attack me, people, for saying this. If you have all of the pharmaceutical industry putting all the dead spinning drugs into you, your liver is going to use up all its glutathione to spit out all that right spinning dead vitamins, dead antibiotics, dead pharmaceutical drugs, dead metals, whatever. And if you then lose all that glutathione to clean your own liver, you've lost the liver that filters the brain. The liver is the fatty filter for the fatty brain. So now you start making bad judgments. You think you're hungry. You start drinking, you smoking, you get into sexual entanglements that are not in your best interest. And suddenly now you've lost control of your physiology. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the biofeedback program, it's living and it has the capacity because it's a tri-vector computer. It can spin left, it can spin right, or it can spin neutral. So the biofeedback works so well, people, because it takes the right spinning dead stuff out of you and spins it leftward and gets it out of you. And it takes the left spinning things that are good for you and spins them even more left, more living, more energetic by putting in trillions of electrons through music. All the electrons act like antioxidants, like vitamin A, C, E, selenium. The antioxidants from our music are jumping onto the mercury 3 plus, the poison. Add on 1 electron, it's mercury 2 plus. Add on another electron, it's mercury 1 plus. Add on the third electron through our music or through antioxidants. Now it's mercury neutral. So now mercury neutral can pass through a lipid neutral membrane and out of you. Mm-hmm. So unless we put the antioxidants into you, you can't pull the metals out of you. They're like a spike stuck into you. And so when you think about putting in not just a couple of vitamin C pills a day, you know, Linus Pauling said you need 10 grams of vitamin C to stop all cancers. So let's put in 10 grams of vitamin C by using a playlist that's full of 10 trillion electrons. And all those trillion electrons circulating through all your tissues and muscles are going to jump onto the empty seat in the bus that's rusted, that needs it. Now, if there's any extra hydrogen coming in from the biofeedback, does it cause an overdose? No. It joins onto oxygen and turns into water and you just pee it out. So there's no negative side effects really, except if you do it too fast, too hard, without enough hydration to flush you as you're doing it. So I recommend all of you remember that sacred geometry, and I structure my water. I have a special MRET chip, makes it high and light. So I drink light all day long.
Yeah.
And you can use, you may have heard of a vitamin called microhydrin, which was 10 trillion hydrogen electrons in rice powder. And I spoke for that company for a while. It eventually became the Royal RBC Life Science Company. And then Patrick Flanagan died recently. He had come out with megahydrin. It's 10 trillion electrons, but the cost of doing that is the same for a bottle of hydrogen as a skio session that can treat 20,000 other things in your body and fill you with 20,000 electrons. And so what we're trying to show you today is there's efficiencies where technology has got faster, smarter, tighter, and safer. The delivery systems have become more easy, portable, distributable, remote access. The cost has come down from tens of thousands down to hundreds or less.
Yes.
And the ability to have, shall we say, an encyclopedia of human health to find out not just the one thing that's wrong with you, but the collection, the biofilm, the strain of the parasites, what bugs, what vaccine miasms do you have? Was your parents suffering syphilis in the 1900s? And that's why you keep showing spirochetes and Lyme co-infections now, because your parents were sensitive to spirochetes 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? By the way, you know, when you take those miasms out of people, they seem to heal permanently. I've never seen the miasms come back after I took them off.
Yeah, you told me that before. Yeah.
And a miasm is a trench coat. It's a trench coat, like not a genetic disease, but a burden you're carrying from the previous generation.
Yes.
And so if you had a mother who was cancerous or allergic, you may not have cancer and allergy in your body right now, but you're sensitive to it because she was sensitive to it.
Yeah.
And I'd like to also mention that I've noticed that the women are coming like crazy for biofeedback. And they will sometimes bring their husbands along once the husband sees that she's doing better.
Yes.
But recently, since I started using the Genius, I had 28 phone calls from men yesterday. I don't know
Wow.
what it was I said that was different. I said, are you willing to join the army of taking care of yourself? And are you willing to do it on your own terms? And I think the men don't want to be told what to do by a practitioner. But if you could give them the playlist that they need and they go home and do it on themselves, they feel like they're in control, and it gives them a sense of priority and or, you know, I don't know. I don't know what the word I'm trying to look for, but it gives them a sense of solace that they are moving forward and they're not stuck anymore.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
most of them come to me quite desperate. Like they start on a very desperate note, and I say, hey, slow down, soldier. All of these things we can do. And generally speaking, unlike a medical doctor who's paid for one complaint per visit, using biofeedback, we see 20 things per visit. Now, I'm not saying you can cure every one of those 20 things in any one visit, but it gives you a game plan. Okay, this guy has parasites, but they're caused by the heavy metals, which are caused by this dental abscess, which is caused by this, you know, whatever. So you do have a chance to dismantle like a detective the component parts and the priority of what the body says is its priority. There's many times that I thought, let's just say, that food poisoning or yeast was a big issue. And I do the whole 2-hour session. I get them all cleaned up. And on the exit, I thought, oh, I'm just going to go back and check the heavy metals because that's the thing that caused it. And they're just roaring with heavy metals. So I spent the whole day killing the yeast. But as the yeast explodes, it releases the lead. It was the lead and mercury that the yeast ate comes out of the yeast as you're detoxing. So if you didn't drain the organs first, and then you exploded all the yeast without any warning, you might actually feel worse.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is why I've produced a training program to try and help people understand the sequence with which they should do things. And by following Mother Nature's seasons, the circadian rhythm, you know, the wood, fire, earth, air, water organs all rotate in spring, summer, winter, fall.
Yes.
So you might want to take a note from Mother Nature that the liver cleans in the spring. So don't try to clean the liver in the cold of winter. It's not going to work as well as if you did it in the spring.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know that I've been working on different seasonal programs I could give you so that we could actually have a special home version of the liver in the liver month, but I could send you the kidney recipe in the kidney month and the heart recipe in the heart month. So if you wanted to sign up as a $49 a month, you know, club, watching, you know, my lectures on this every week, you know, you can get a whole medical school version of knowledge from me. I just finished 102 lectures once a week for 1 to 2 hours with 100 slide deck ebook that you can have. And I went through every organ in the whole body. First, I did nutrition. Then I did the enzymes and cleaning of the organ. Then I went for inflammation of that organ. And then I went right down to degeneration of that organ. And so for every month of the last 2 years, I was showing my class, how can you clean out the body by using the own anatomy and physiology of normalness?
Yeah.
Don't put in foreign substances. Don't put in more drugs and more stuff to suppress the function and the symptom. Bring up the organ back to its normal function, and you won't have the symptom and need that drug.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, needless to say, the pharmaceutical industry doesn't like me. And my medical professional license was challenged with 438 letters to stop doing biofeedback and to put me through 23 committees saying that I was crazy. And in the end, I've been proven right. So, you know, vindication is in living well.
Yeah,
you don't
you've
need
been
to be,
beating this drum for
you
a
don't
long
need to be
time.
looking back at what everybody did badly for the last century. Yeah. I don't have vindictiveness in my blood, but I do have a pet peeve about people being ignorant and lied to. So where you want to have the mainstay of biofeedback is it's a truth detector. Whether or not you have the bravery and the stomach to look at the truth of what's going on with you, and that you have a practitioner who cannot judge you, who's not biased, but who says, don't worry, these things can be corrected by the end of today. Don't even think about it. Don't look in the rear view mirror. Let's release these old patterns so that you can get on with a healthier procedure. I don't have anybody objecting unless they just don't have the money. And if you don't have the money, I give it to them for free anyway. I usually
Yeah.
take 10% of all my clients and I give it to those who are most desperate. The other day I had a man call me. He said, I've got lung cancer and prostate cancer and colon cancer and liver cancer, but I'm willing to give this a try because, I think it might be doing something good for me. I don't know. So I decided to throw the book at him overnight. I did a biofeedback scan. The next day, his pneumonia is gone. His gout is down. He's pooping for the first time in 5 days, and he feels marvelous. So maybe I didn't prevent him from dying, but maybe I did. Maybe I found out there was a massive tapeworm causing his diabetes, his high sugar that led to this high cholesterol that led to his artery disease. So maybe if he was alive enough long enough, I'm going to be able to wean him down through those major issues. But to my surprise, he calls me back the next day. His pneumonia is gone. He's like, the first day he's talking like a rambling guy. Next day, his voice is clear. Next day, he's chipper. Next day, he's kind of saying that his wife is amazed. So you can see that the subtlety of the energy can bring on more than subtle improvements and quickly.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But what do you, obviously, I think you having a medical background is very helpful in terms of trust, people coming to you and trusting that. What can
that might be a detriment now.
Well, no, because
I think that the trust will be replacing out of doctors. I think that trust is going to shift over to practitioners like yourself who have authenticity, charming, engaged, reciprocally interested in that person, not with their hand on a doorknob with a prescription in their hand and you're running out of the room in a minute. And once you get to know these clients, I must say to you that I spend a lot of time on my first visit because I think they feel respected by me. Then they trust me. Then they divulge those little secrets that they might not have wanted to say. But they also don't take anywhere near the amount of time on my second, third, and fourth visit because they already know that I've got their story. They already know that they feel better after that first blitz treatment. And I always book 2 hours on the first session so that I know that they got something done that they can feel. Now, if you're going to be exporting it to their, if you're using the Genius program, which is a more portable tablet based, it can export the playlist to their cell phone. But the problem there is that sometimes I noticed they didn't even pick it up off the cell phone. So I got to call them back and say, are you too tired and sick today? You didn't pick up your recipe. You ordered Chinese food, but it's sitting here, it's getting cold, and some of them just, one guy called me the other day and he said, you know what? I tried the first remedy, but I was just so Herxheimering, I couldn't tolerate it. So these are the people who you have to give them the respect that they might have a sulfur deficiency gene, or maybe they have so much toxins that they can't afford to be pushed on the very first visit. You need to build them up. And this is where I built the amp coil. I built the amp coil as a mini-me where you would be a greatest hits jukebox so that you wouldn't have to do any programming. You wouldn't have to know any medical knowledge. All you would do is you go and do the voice print and it says you need a liver cleanse. So you hit that liver greatest hits album for 33 minutes and you clean your liver. Now, the benefit of the amp coil and its compatriot, which is the amp coil has a software called the Better Guide software to guide you better. And that software was bought by Genius program and turned into the Odyssey program. So I wrote the Odyssey program secretly. Nobody knows that. And there were a couple other people on the team that helped. But generally speaking, what I found in the Genius is one more level above all of what I've said so far. The Genius has the other capacity to take gematria words and turn them into frequencies. So I spent the last 24 months taking every medical term out of my brain, putting it onto a spreadsheet, and building it into a new generic word library so I could pass you down my liver scan module, my liver health safari, and it would say what bugs you have, what remedies do you need, and which ones are the ones for you exactly. Then you could go on to the kidney module and see what the kidney needs. Now, there may be 5 herbs for the kidney, but because you had E. coli, you needed herb number 3.
Yes.
So it's much more important to give the exact herb for the exact issue so that you're not you don't want to have multiple drugs and multiple things going. You give them exactly what they match as a mirror image digital concordant signal. We call that concordant harmonic vibration.
Yes.
So if I have a tuning fork in the coda C and a tuning fork in D, and if I start singing the note C, this one's going to start vibrating in concordance, but this one isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm using this to explain why biofeedback gives no side effects. It only vibrates you back into tune, but it leaves the normal parts of you alone.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there's a big difference in allopathic medicine where one antibiotic just knocks out 18 months of all your normal flora while it's trying to knock out your strep throat.
Yeah, I know exactly. It's just a bomb goes off, isn't it? That affects the entire body. So, somebody's asking. That sounds interesting. What's the best way for people to contact you? Is it email?
Well, I have a new email. It's Dr. Drake 432 at Gmail. Can I put it in the chat, maybe?
That's what I'm just doing.
Yeah.
Gmail.com.
Dr. Drake at 432 at Gmail. And if you want to call me directly, I do have a new hotline phone number and an assistant here. So a lot of people are finding texting me directly gets a really quick answer to your needs. So let me just get my phone number in here.
Did you mention a new website?
Yes. Well, okay. So geniusbalancingeducation.com is where you can get my 100 hours of training. Genius Balancing
Education.
Yeah. Are you writing that in there or am I?
No, I'm writing it. That's not coming up.
It isn't? Let me just see. Genius. What have I got the wrong website? Let me think about this. My other website is okay, wait a second here. My main website with all of my links is called healthcounts.ca.
Counts.ca.
I'll just pop that in the chat box here. And what I'm doing is I'm taking calls for people who need help. Then I'm figuring out if they want to buy the software like you're selling, or would they like us to do it on them to get them settled down, or would they like to take the home version of the Quanta Cap? It's called the Quanta Insight Quanta Cap. We give a 2-week free trial, and it helps you get used to the software on your cell phone. Then you can send us a playlist for $99 US a week, and basically it allows us to give you a weekly progressive therapy. Okay.
Yes. And I say to people with the trial, don't take the trial unless you're actually going to listen to the tracks, because it takes it's you still have to do it. Do you find that? I'm like, you need to listen to it.
I totally agree. I think that what I've noticed is if I give it for free, they don't appreciate it.
Yes.
So I've started charging even for the trial in some cases if I find that I'd like to install them right away. And what I do notice is and just a second here. I hope this works. Let's just see if that goes. Do you see InsightHealthApps.com, my site, Dr. Drake? This is where you can see some of this equipment and technology on sale. Yes. I also have a new website for nutrition. It's called InRhythmNutrients.com. And if you want to get a boat.
In Rhythm.
It's the promo code is Drake15 for 15% off. So that's In Rhythm Nutrients. In Rhythm. It's hard to spell that one. I hate to say it. I know. I didn't realize it was so tough to spell until I actually made my website up. In Nutrients.com. I hope that works. And use the promo code Drake15 if you want to get 15% off, okay?
Let me just
And
check.
I already made these prices very helpful. I hope that link works. I'm not sure.
No, it doesn't work.
InRhythmNutrients.com?
No.
Have I spelled it wrong?
Let me see.
This is bad, girls. We don't even know how to spell rhythm. I can't.
RHY. There's a Y missing. That's why.
RHYTHYM? Oh, I got the Y in the wrong place. I see it. Dear me. Okay, well, sorry, folks. I'm having technical challenges this week. Are you guys having problems? I've been having so much.
Absolutely. There's been
like
lots
I can't get my internet to stay stable.
No, I've been exact same here. It's been crazy. Right, awesome. Well, that's as usual. You've given us so much information to think about, and obviously, I mean, I am a Quest 9 practitioner, not as experienced as you, but also I don't have a huge amount of time for that, obviously, because I'm running the Pop-Up Healing Centre. But people can also get in touch with you at Dr Drake 432 at Gmail if they want to have a session with you. So, what's the cost if somebody wants a Quest 9 session with you?
I charge $150 an hour.
$150 an hour. That's fantastic. Canadian.
I usually charge 2 hours. I think I got an incorrect typo there on my phone number. If you want to get me directly, text me at 647-986-4627. Or Margaret Mead is my assistant here. She's a quantum practitioner, and she takes a lot of my calls sometimes I'm with a client. So I'm just going to pop down her number for you guys. It's 896-3488. And if you needed to reach her or myself, then we can get you hooked up. What was that?
What's the country code? I'm saying I should know what it is. I'll just.
Oh, it's country code Canada. The country code is Canada.
I know it's
+1.
+1 647. You've got that, so it's +1.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Right.
Okay.
Well, I just want to say to you, my dear, you have been such a Trojan in the field of helping people. The clients that we've shared together have been literally tragic and or jubilant at the same time. We've had some great saves, and we've lost some people who didn't get to us in time, and it's led you and I to have a heart connection that will last our lifetimes, won't it?
Absolutely.
And I do thank you for reaching out and helping the people that you have.
It just drives us forward to get this information and this technology out to people, knowing that prevention is better than cure, isn't it? And listen, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your experience. I'm hugely grateful and appreciative, and have a wonderful festive season. And I will
thank you. My pleasure working with you.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll get some things done. The world's tilting, so let's get tilting with it. Have a wonderful holiday, and God bless you, and keep safe and keep your chin up and don't look in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, exactly. Ahead only.